Hello, my quilting friends. My name is Leah Day, and welcome to episode 81 of the podcast. And today I want to share my thoughts and experiences from Hart Square. This was an amazing event that I went to on Saturday. I spent the day in costume and demonstrating, did some hand quilting, and I just had a blast. So that's what this episode's going to be about. And I'm going to just share all how that went and all that went on and all that good stuff. So what am I working on as I share this podcast with you today? I am cleaning up my yarn, getting everything organized from my freeform crochet sweater. And it is nearly done. I'm at the embellishment stage, and this is one of those situations where I can stop now or I can keep going. And I've got a few spots that just, some of the medallions, some of them worked and some of them just didn't work at all. And I was experimenting with different starting techniques when I was crocheting this. So, I'd see something online and try out a new starting technique. Well, I'm finding that the starting technique that I had at the very beginning was good. And that was, most of these medallions were started with 5 single crochets, and then I'd slip stitch to create a loop. Well, when I started playing around with some different starts, those starts were not as good. Things like using a magic circle and things like that, they did not work. And once I started wearing the sweater, those medallions started to fall apart from the center out, which is really not any fun. So I've been going through and working on that a little bit, and the nice thing is it is a pretty easy fix. If a crochet medallion starts to fall apart from the center, you basically take a yarn needle, thread it with yarn, try and catch all of those loops, because crochet, how it works, it's all in loops and that kind of thing. You try and catch all of them, cinch it, tie it in a knot, and then add more, go around and around and around repeated times through all of those loops and reinforce it. And so it's not the end of the world. It's not going to ruin the sweater or anything like that if more of these continue to fall apart. It's just a pain, and I was really wanting this kind of to be done at this stage. And then I had just one that, I don't know, something about that one just it just hit every branch on the ugly tree. And then I kept throwing more yarn at it, and I keep making it worse. I'm almost at the point where I'm going to just make a separate medallion and stick it on top of it like an applique. Might get to that point, but right now I think I could probably do something like this wobbly stitch. And just so you know, there is video in addition to audio with all of the podcasts, so you can see this crocheted sweater that I'm talking about right now. It is bright orange and yellow and red, and it is the perfect colors for the fall, and it is probably going to be the perfect sweater to wear in the next couple of weeks. It has finally gotten chilly after a very, very warm fall, and I'm excited about being able to wear this. Probably definitely going to wear something underneath it, like a long sleeve t-shirt like I'm wearing today. Wear that underneath it, so that way it's the yarn's a little bit on the itchy side. So speaking of yarn, this past weekend was SAF, the Southeastern Animal Fiber Fair, and no, I did not get to go. After Hart Square, it's one thing that, I talk about sometimes being introverted, and it's not about being shy, for me at least. I'm not a shy person. I can hang out with people all day long, and I love to get hugs and handshakes and all that good stuff. So I'm not shy, but it is a drain to be around a lot of people. Not a drain isn't a bad thing, but just simply that pulls energy out rather than puts energy back in. For an extrovert, when you're around people, then you get lots of energy from those people and kind of feed off of their energy. Introverts are the opposite. And so after a day of being around lots and lots of people, I couldn't be around more people at SAF. And then too, money's a little tight this fall, and I didn't really have the cash to go. And it's one thing to go to a big, huge animal fiber fair and see lots of beautiful yarn, and then kind of be like, well, I can't really buy anything right now. I don't really need any yarn. I already have tons. And to, while I would really like that, big triangular shawl loom, it's something to think about for next year. And this is the thing, I think all businesses go through ups and downs. All families go through ups and downs. Different things can happen. And it's just a little tight right now, and that's okay. We're going into the busier season, and I am ramping things up. I've got lots and lots of fun tutorials for you guys, plus the new Quilt Along. So, new Quilt Along, I have shared a little bit about it in the newsletter, but I don't think I've shared very much in the podcast. So, a few details. Number one, here is the, at least the starting image that I'm using for it. It's Leah's Friendship Quilt Along. We're going to go back to our monthly, it's a monthly block of the month. You'll get a new block every month. And again, we're going to do piecing and quilting. So you'll learn how to piece the block, and then you'll learn how to quilt it with me. And this is the first year, and I'm kind of giving you some sneak peeks, but on some of this stuff, it's still a question whether I have time, but my plan and my goal is to offer a pattern that has multiple sizes. And this is the first time I'm doing this, where instead of just making 12 blocks and making a throw, you will be able to make any size quilt that you want, whether it's a baby quilt, a throw, a queen, or a king. And I am going to be making a king. And the main reason is that's what I actually need in my house. I need a king size quilt. I have plenty of throws, and I don't need any more throws. I really do need a new king size quilt I'm thinking a wool batting. I need something really, really warm for the winter time. So that's what I'm planning on making. And in order to make that king size quilt, I'm going to end up making 2 blocks for every block of the month. So that'll be 24 blocks. And then there's going to be a bonus block. That'll be the 13th. And that would, if you do 2 of each plus the bonus block, then that's 25 blocks. This quilt is going to have supersized blocks. And so 25 blocks equals a king size quilt, 105 inches. That's the math I've done. So if you are in the mood to do a king size quilt or a queen or a twin/full or throw or a baby quilt, start getting excited about Leah's Friendship Quilt Along. It's going to be so much fun. The style is super scrappy. This is going to be something that you can use to cut up your stash. And that's exactly what I've done. Actually, Dad and I have been working on this for more than a year. I have taken my entire stash, everything that is not on a bolt, everything that is, all my fat quarters, everything that could be washed and starched and pressed has been washed and starched and pressed and cut into 5-inch squares. And so that's a little sneak peek about how this is going to work. This is going to be charm pack friendly. If you want to use charm packs, you can do that too. But I'm basically going to start bagging up my stash into packs of those 5-inch squares, and I'm going to sell them. So your quilt can be a little bit of you and a little bit of me, and if you wanted to get some other friends involved, then you can do that too. But also know that you don't have to go scrappy happy if you don't want to. You could also just simply do a 2-color quilt. That would be fine too. Basically the scrap, how I am writing the patterns, is the scrap is basically fabric A, and that is any scrap that you want to use, or any fabric color that you want to use, and then your background fabric is fabric B, and I am using black. Simply because I think it looks really good. You could use white, you could use gray, you could use orange. Everybody loved that idea of cutting up my crazy step out scraps and using orange fabric to connect it all together. I am going to do a tutorial on that, definitely, just as soon as I get ahead on my massive growing list of things that I have to do. Yeah, it's been a crazy month. It really has been. I feel like I've been very, very busy, but not actually getting very much done, which is not very fun, I've got to say. I think most of what I've been working on Miss Bunny pattern a whole lot. I've been working on Mally and getting the book, kind of doing a lot of learning and that kind of thing with this book launch. And yeah, it feels like this month has really flown by, and it feels like I'm all of a sudden behind on a lot of different things. So if I seem a little bit frantic, that's partly why. But yeah, I'm definitely going to be doing a tutorial on that one too. But yeah, back to Leah's Friendship Quilt Along. My goal is to have maybe that bonus pattern, and that pattern will include the resizing information. So if you're wanting a king, if you're wanting a queen, if you're wanting a weird sized quilt, then you'll be able to pick up that bonus pattern in December and be able to get started and kind of get a little head start on everything. And what's really fun is because I'm making 2 identical blocks for each month, I think I'm going to quilt it 2 different ways too. I'm going to quilt one block on my home machine, and I'm going to quilt the other on the long arm. So I think that'll be a lot of fun too. As far as the mystery aspect, I've been kind of debating whether this is a mystery or not a mystery. I don't think the piecing is going to be a mystery. I think I'm just going to release that so you can see what the overall, blocks are going to look like, so you can kind of get an idea of what you want to do with your fabrics and that kind of thing. So the quilt itself is not going to be a mystery. The quilting is going to be the mystery, because I really want this to flow a little bit differently. Number one, these blocks are much more patchwork heavy. And that means a lot more seam allowances. And that means they're really hard to mark designs with a light box the way we've done in years past. It's just gotten really tough. The more complex the piecing, the more little seam allowances in there, the harder and harder that becomes. And that's been an issue for a lot of quilters in past years. Whenever we did Flower Festival, a lot of people started struggling to be able to mark those designs. So we're not going to mark, and we're going to do something else. We're going to do ruler quilting. We're going to do some walking foot quilting. We're going to do some free motion quilting. And yeah, every block is going to be, the quilting will be the mystery. But you'll be able to see the whole image and everything, hopefully starting next week. And Dad has been so super helpful with this. Like I said, I've been super busy with Mally and kind of working on Miss Bunny, and finally got all the photos shot for that pattern this weekend, and Dad has been working on doing the diagrams and stuff for this new quilt along. So it really has been a major collaboration with Dad and I. He's been the one slicing up my entire stash, and it's really cool to have a total reset like this, where I feel like at this stage now, everything in my stash will be from 2018 new. And it's really making me start thinking about, what fabrics I'm really in the mood to use. I had a lot of prints. I had a lot of things on this shelf that I was just not using. I really want to only invest and have fabrics on the shelf that I am going to use and I'm excited about using. So yeah, just thinking about all of that and kind of figuring out what I want to do next. I'm thinking some shot cottons. Shot cottons are really cool. They are a thicker weaved fabric where the weft and the weave, those are the two lines that form the fabric, are different colors. And because they're different colors, you get different effects. So I've got a color card to kind of start planning out what I want to do with some shot cottons. And Pepper Corey, my friend I talked about last week, she has an excellent line of shot cottons called Peppered Solids. If you want to look them up and start looking at those, check them out. They are super, super cool. So yeah, that's really what I've been thinking about. I'm really excited about this new quilt along, and it's going to be a hustle. I will be completely honest. It's going to be a hustle all through November, but I think I can get this extra bonus block pattern done and have that information ready for you guys in December. Maybe not December 1st, but definitely in December. So if you're wanting to get a head start, if you're wanting to have something fun to work on through the month of December, you can, or you can wait. It is an optional extra block. You don't have to do it, but I think it would be really fun if we did. So yeah, that's my plan at least, and I hope that you're looking forward to it, learning how to piece and quilt along with me in 2019 with Leah's Friendship Quilt Along. And yeah, just stay tuned. Keep listening to the podcast, and also get on our newsletter. You can sign up at leahday.com/newsletter, and then you'll get the most updates of everything that's going on every week. So I talked a little bit there about Miss Bunny and Mally the Maker. This is the final day that you can pre-order. If you want to get a signed copy of Mally the Maker and the Queen in the Quilt, that is my fiction novel it's a fantasy novel about a little girl who goes on an amazing adventure looking for her grandma. She's been missing for a while, and it's such a fun story, and I have had a blast writing it. I'm already on chapter 4 of book 2. I'm writing book 2 already, and that's going great. And yeah, come and pre-order a copy, get a little discount. I'm going to sign all the books, and they're all shipping out starting on November 1st. And you can also pre-order a copy of the Miss Bunny sewing pattern. So I had some fun playing around with Miss Bunny and took her out on a little photo shoot, and I made her a swing. I'm honestly just getting started. The props in Miss Bunny are endless, really. I spent all day Sunday kind of locked myself in the crafty cottage and just shot pictures for the pattern. And I decided I was going to do diagrams, and ultimately in the creation of that pattern, I just decided, you know what, I can make really good high contrast black and white photos that you can clearly see the stitching, and you get so much more information from each photo. Because diagrams, it's so easy to miss things. It's so easy to like miss putting in that line, or you don't get the fabric exactly right, and then which side's the right side and the wrong side and all that kind of stuff. It's really hard to make a really solid diagram that's very clear, that has all the information that you need without it becoming so complicated you don't know what you're looking at. It's just a big blob on a page. So ultimately I decided to shoot photos. I ended up shooting like 250 photos. And then out of those, I'm using 30, that just gives you an idea of like the ramp up that it takes. You shoot so much and then you go through it, and I'm looking at, okay, well, which one came out right? And then which image actually works best in the pattern and all that good stuff. And I'm really excited about this. This is my first doll pattern ever. It's come out really, really good. And I'm excited. I can't wait for people to make lots of Miss Bunnies, and they'll be great gifts. I now can cut one out and, put it together in about an hour. The dress probably take another 30 minutes or so. So once you get to know the pattern and understand it, then it does go very quickly. The panties, the little bloomers that are included, I can probably crack through one of those in about 10 minutes. So it does go very fast. It's a very simple pattern. And then thanks to Dad did pattern testing on this too. I know that this is pretty much written at a beginner level because Dad has never sewn anything ever. He makes quilts with me all the time, but sewing, I realized, is a very different skill. It is a very different thing. Things like, what confused him the most, it was so funny. I had these instructions for making Miss Bunny's dress, and it's a fully lined bodice, and it makes turning that neckline so much easier. Instead of having to sit there and, stitch bias binding or something and flipping it under like a facing, I just did a doubled bodice, so that way it's fully lined and it's much easier to turn. And Dad couldn't understand it because he'd never sewn a doll dress or any kind of dress ever before. So he didn't have that, foundation of having made a dress and had a fully lined bodice ever. So he didn't understand. And so a lot of times in pattern testing, he was kind of arguing with me. It was like, well, I don't understand why you're asking me to do it that way. And so I conceded to that. I was like, okay, well, maybe it just doesn't make sense, the why. And I remember catching myself when I first started sewing, arguing with patterns. Like, I don't understand why you're asking me to do that hem that way, and I'm not going to do it until I understand why. And there's a time that you have to kind of just trust it and just do it the way it's written. But I ended up adding a few lines here and there, like, we are going to make a fully lined bodice, which makes turning the neckline much easier. And I think that helps. That helps a lot. And by the end, Dad was knocking it out. He did the bloomers, the little panties, all by himself. Didn't need any help with that at all. That was great. And yeah, it's really funny. We have a friend, a high school friend that I grew up with. He's having a baby. Well, his wife is having a baby, and they're having a little girl. And so Dad was like, well, I think I'll take that, that Miss Bunny that I made. She's kind of not exactly perfect, but she's definitely very, very cute. And he's like, I'll take that one and give it to her. So it really is a sweet gift to be able to give. And I love seeing more Miss Bunnies out in the world. She was a very special doll that I grew up with, and I'm excited to be able to share that and have that continue. And yes, I will be working on a Mally doll. Gonna do some really fun yarn hair for her. Pretty much going to be the same body type, just going to change her head up. And then, of course, new clothes. Mally wears jeans and a t-shirt, or kind of a long sleeve t-shirt through the book. At one point, she cuts her jeans off and turns them into, cut off jean shorts. Part of a plot point. And so I probably include patterns for both of those. That'll be a lot of fun. I'm just having a blast. You know, it's a challenge, it's hard, and that's part of why I love it so much. I'm also planning some quilt tutorials too, obviously. A lot of people have been liking the backdrop I have in the Crafty Cottage. That is a pattern that I made for Island Batik a few years ago, actually, and I just need to set it up as a digital pattern so that way you guys can come and get it. That'll be at leahday.com/illusion. It's an illusion mosaic quilt. It's really neat. When you step back from it, it kind of has this kind of crazy effect that it's almost an optical illusion to make the squares look curving. So it's really neat. And I have just about wound up all of my yarn balls, which is great because this was just this whole corner has gotten so messy and junky from this project. And I've been sitting here winding all this up and just cleaning it up because I am really ready for this to get off the dressmaker dummy, my freeform crocheted sweater, get off the dressmaker dummy and move on. Speaking of moving on, I finished a pair of knitted socks. This was made with this bright, cheerful green yarn. It's a striped yarn. And how I made these, this actually worked really, really well for me. I don't know about you, but if you've ever knitted socks, you know, you're kind of ambitious with that first one. It's like, yeah, I'm making socks. It's gonna be so much fun. And you make that first one, and then by the time you get done with it, it's like, I do not want to make another one ever again. And so I, end up with a whole lot of single socks floating around, and obviously it's not a finished project unless you have two. So the solution that I had with this pair of socks was I bought 2 balls of yarn and I had them both going at the same time. So I had 2 sets of needles the same size. And so I would knit to a point, like, in socks you have different stages. So you've got the toe, you've got the heel, then you've got the space above the heel, the ankle, all those different things. So I basically would knit one set and get it to the next kind of change in the pattern. Then I'd go and pick up the other sock and knit it up to that change in the pattern. And I'd go back and forth between the two. And that resulted in 2 socks finished at the same time, roughly, which is really nice. And what's also nice about that is you can memorize the pattern, whatever you're doing. If it's a repeating pattern, of what you're doing, then it's much easier and you can kind of veg out. I like patterns where I don't have to think about it too much and I can just veg out and know what I'm doing and count my stitches until I get to the right point. That worked out really well, but then the socks stayed in my little knitting bowl, my little yarn bowl here for another 6 months because I did not know how to tie off the toe. And it just took looking in one book and reviewing it's like a weaving path where you tie up the knitting so it looks seamless. Yeah, and it just sat here for 8 months in a bowl while I didn't go look up that stitch, and it was in a book in the next room. So yeah, one of those things, I get stuck on projects too, things sit around unfinished for forever until it's like, I'm sitting here, I've got the stuff, let's just finish this thing, and it feels so good. I've been wearing these now for 2 days, and I just think they are the cutest socks ever. They're bright blue and green, and they've got like a stripe of yellow, and yeah, I'm delighted to be able to wear those. And now some fun tutorials that I've shared. I have finally updated the Chakra wall hanging. This is a new version of the wall hanging. I shared this tutorial a couple years ago. The designs became unavailable because that was another collection that I did with another company. Now we have digitized the designs, all fresh and new, and now you can find all of them in the Elemental Energies embroidery collection. And I actually put this collection together with designs that would specifically go well in Chakra wall hangings. And so I've got Dahlia, Spiral Paisley, Foundation Puzzle, Heart Paisley, Lightning Bolt, Sun Medallion, and Infinity Tree. So that's what I used in one. And then in this one, totally different designs, but still really cool effect. I've got Tropical Flower, Flame Flower, Icicle Lights, Heart, that is Feathered Hearts. Some of these I'm like, Pea Gravel Path, Sand Dollar, and Delicate Petal Flower. And also in that tutorial is a new quilt as you go technique. So all of these blocks were embroidered separately, and then I stitched them together with a new quilt as you go technique. You'll definitely want to check out this tutorial. You can find that at leahday.com/tutorials. Chakra 2. It is the second version of the Chakra tutorial, so I just did it at Chakra 2. So come and check that out and learn a new quilt as you go technique, learn how to do some machine embroidery with me, and I want to do more machine embroidery. I'm thinking some bags and just some fun little gift projects to do through the fall and into the holiday season. Okay, so that is pretty much it for what is going on around the house. I'm also sharing Frame Quilting Friday videos every Friday, and we are almost done with the update to the free motion quilting project. I'm hoping that that will go live sometime this week and you'll be able to see the new website, and it's going to be really, really good. I've just got a few more tweaks to do and we're going to be getting that up. I'm super, super excited about it. So now let's talk about Hart Square. I am so excited. It was just such a great event, and I didn't want to go too crazy with my costume up to it. So I kind of waited to the last minute on Friday. The event was on Saturday. I waited to the last minute on Friday and I was like, all right, now I get to work on my costume, because if I gave myself the entire week, I'd be going crazy. It would just go way over the top. So I decided to wait till Friday, and I was like, all right, I really want a hat. It was cold. It rained all day Friday, and it was cold, cold rain. So I was like, all right, I really want a cool hat that will be warm. And I was thinking, okay, I'll put some wool batting in there. Maybe I'll quilt it, and that will work out really good. So I threw some white fabric up on the long arm and wool batting in between, and then said, okay, I'll just stitch it really quick with some stippling. And then I stitched the circles, and then I cinched it up, and what I got was this like brain looking thing. So Halloween costume idea, in case you're wanting to know how to make fabric look like brains. Do a really big open stippling design and kind of cinch it up in a circular shape, and it's going to look like a brain. So I shared a picture of that on Instagram and got some chuckles. What I did to fix it was I basically just slapped another piece of white cotton fabric on top, stitched around it, stitched where I have the cinching, where I did basically just a double line of stitching, and then ran a piece of ribbon through it, and that cinches it up, and then tied it in a little bow at the back, and there we go. That is my lovely colonial cap is what that's called. Now after making it, it was nice and warm, but I wished it covered my ears. The tips of my ears were quite chilly. So I'm going to make another one. And I believe what I did was I had a 7-inch circle, and then I had a 12-inch circle stitched. I think I'll go up to a 14-inch circle, which will be pretty big. But I'm thinking go up to 14 inches for where I have the cinching, and then bump out to 15 inches overall for the hat, and then I'll get that nice ruffly edge. And I think that will be big enough where it will completely cover my head and surround my ears too. But yeah, I really like that. I think that turned out really nicely. This will be the perfect cap if it's a really warm day in the fall, or if I do an event in the spring, then this will be the perfect cap for that. The wool definitely kept my head warm. It really, really did. And that was important because I was quilting in a cabin that was originally built in 1840. And it was heated by a wood fire that was a good 15 feet across the room, and it was chilly. It really was. It was cold in there. It was so awesome though, guys. It really, really was. So the frame itself, let me just kind of break it down for you. You walk into the cabin, and it was the steps, and I'm going to say steps in quotation marks because it was 3 rocks stacked up on top of one another and very slippery, actually. The railing is an old piece of wood, that just screams splinters, so you kind of don't want to touch it. So I was very cautious. I did not want to fall down these rock steps, so I was very careful. get up onto the porch, and they have banjo and fiddle players out on the front porch. So we got the music out front, which is great. You walk into the cabin, and it's a big open room, probably about 20 feet wide by about 12 feet deep. There's a fireplace on the right side with a little hearth, and they have a few pieces of period furniture. In the corner, they had an entire stash of cobbler tools. So where somebody would come and get shoes made, the town cobbler would make an actual carving of your foot, the size and shape of your foot, and then make your boots from that. And they didn't have anyone that was demonstrating that, but they had all of the tools and all of the molds and stuff that they would have used in that corner. And basically the guy that has put together Hart Square has just been a collector of history. He collected these log cabins. There's over 80 now, and I don't know how anyone could hit all of them in one day. It's huge. It's crazy huge. And then they're all fully furnished. They, have all of these things in them. Our cabin had a clock and a wardrobe and actually 3 quilt frames. So one frame was a baby quilt frame from the 1800s. It was not in the best shape, and the quilt on it was just a finished vintage quilt. Obviously, it was definitely an old quilt, but it wasn't an in-progress quilt. I did take a look at that, and that frame was pretty neat. It was very, very simple. It was just made out of wood, rough hewn, and then the wood had been turned, so it did make dowels on both sides to roll up the quilt, and then it was locked in place by a simple cam, and that was basically just a circular disc that had been cut with notches so it could be locked in place. It's absolute simple construction. And so a baby quilt was on that one, and then the frame that we were quilting on was much bigger. It was probably a queen-sized frame. It was definitely 3 women could set on both sides and stitch comfortably if there was enough light. We didn't quite have enough light for that many people to be setting around the frame. So when we had 3 people around it, that was really perfect. When it got to be more than that, at one point we had 5 women around the frame. That started to feel just a little bit too tight, but it was so much fun. It really, really was. The frame itself had been broken. Someone apparently had leaned on it in years past and split one of the connections on one corner, so we were really careful and cautious about that. And I'm going to send an email and just say, hey, at some point over the year, can we see if we can get that fixed? But basically, again, very simple construction, made out of wood, simple wooden legs that come up, have that cam, and I don't think that it wasn't even circular dowels that made up the sides. I'm pretty sure that they were square pieces of wood that made up the sides. But yeah, it was really, really neat to be able to stitch on that and do some hand quilting. The third frame was on the ceiling, and it was bolted to the ceiling. I don't know if they have the pulley system set up for it or not. It had another quilt mounted onto it, but again, it wasn't an in-progress quilt. That was just clearly a vintage quilt that had been finished and then pinned to this frame just for visual. And so it was clamped to the ceiling. And what was fun is as people would come by, I would point to it and say, that's how my great-grandmother had her frame. My great-grandmother, Harrison, she lived in Mansfield, Texas. She had a small little farmhouse, and this is a story that I have heard, on the weekends, I think every Sunday night, they would pull down the frame from the ceiling, and it was held up there with pulleys, and they'd pull it down, and she would set around the frame with her sisters, and I think she had 7 or 8 sisters, and they would come over and they would all do some hand quilting together every evening or every weekend. I think that's just so wonderful. And sitting there with women, and all of these women were strangers. I'd never met any of these women before, but to be able to sit down with them and stitch together, it was so relaxing. It really felt like this is something that I think we need, to be in the company of other women and to just that kind of very soft chit chat that happens naturally when you're doing something like that. It's not a strenuous conversation. It's just catching up, and it's just sharing, and it's just nice. And it made me realize, how much knowledge would have been shared during those moments. Like, a younger girl coming in and sitting down with her mother or her aunts or her mother's friends, and the knowledge that would have been shared around the quilting frame, the things that she would have been picking up on as a woman, the stories that are shared. She would have been learning how to act, how to behave, who has the good husband, who has the bad husband, what to look for in a man. She would have been picking up all of those social cues from those experiences of the stories shared around the quilt frame. And I really feel like that is something that we have lost, and it's sad. And it's something that I would really enjoy getting back, and I don't know how to facilitate that. I can definitely say I am looking at my house going, where can I stick a quilting frame? Where can I strap it to the ceiling and pull it down with pulleys? Because I really enjoyed that. Now, I will be completely honest, I felt a little nervous about my quilting stitches. I really didn't know if somebody was going to judge my stitches. I didn't really know what to expect. I have never really done a lot of hand quilting. Most of the quilting I do is on the machine. The little bit that I have done was big stitch hand quilting, and that was on Torrent to Fear with glittery decorative thread. So it kind of wasn't this style of tiny stitches, carefully done, and it was a very, very simple design that we were doing. We were just doing straight line cross hatching over a double Irish chain quilt. So it's super, super simple quilting. And I was a little worried. I really was. I was a little nervous going into it, but everybody was so super sweet. And I quickly realized I could not rock stitch on that quilt at all, because this quilt is 6 or 7 years old, at least, number one. It got started a long time ago. It was hand pieced, but it was basted with a very, very thick, fluffy polyester batting. And so when you're hand quilting, you can rock stitch and kind of, you insert the needle and push it up from underneath the hoop and try and rock the needle back up to the surface. Well, I could not rock stitch and actually make a stitch on the back because the batting was so thick and fluffy. So instead, I stab stitched every single stitch. So basically, I stabbed down, took the needle with my other hand underneath the hoop, turned it, and then came back up. And I was moving pretty quick. I got 2 blocks almost. I did a lot of cleanup, I'll be honest. It was surprising how easy it is to veer as you're hand quilting. And at first, when I first looked at the quilt, I was just kind of like, how could you? There were some mistakes, and I was kind of like, how can you make a mistake like that? Where on a double Irish chain, you've got points, and clearly someone started on this point and was aiming for this point, but ended up going for this point. So the line veered, kind of drunkenly across the quilt. And ultimately, as we were stitching over it, we decided to do some pulling out and correct some of those lines. It was not a lot, but just a little bit of correcting. And I actually heard the year before, most of the stitches that had been put in by the morning crowd got ripped out by the evening crowd. And I was thinking, no, that's a little scary. I don't want anybody ripping out my stitches. It kind of made me sad for those women, but I could kind of see why, when, so many very, very obvious mistakes were being made. It was kind of clear why. But I definitely understand the hand quilting mentality a lot more, because you are setting at a quilt 4 hours, and that is all you're doing. It's really easy to start getting very obsessive about all of the details. So I don't know how many times someone complained about the thick, fluffy batting. I don't know how many times somebody complained about the red fabric. It's a white and red double Irish chain, and the red fabric, everyone questioned at some point whether the red fabric was cotton or polyester blend, because it it felt different to stitch into. And I mean, it's a nuanced thing. It's a tiny thing, but when you're making 50 million stitches by hand into something, you tend to get a little obsessive about it. And so that was kind of funny, it's like the things that you don't notice, and kind of don't get really obsessive about when you're machine quilting, because it's so much faster. You're, slam, bam, think a ma'am, you get it done. It's in and out. It's on the frame, off the frame, or it's on the machine and off the machine. You're not getting obsessive about those details, like, is that fabric 100% cotton, and why did they make that choice? And all those little things really do make a very big difference to a hand quilter, and largely because hand quilter is going to be dealing with that for years on end. And this quilt in particular gets stitched on one day a year, every year, and that's it. And so it's no wonder that it has been in progress for 6 or 7 years now. In the time that Hart Square has been going on, it was the 35th year this year. They've had 3 quilts that have been made and hand quilted. One of the women there had been at almost every single Hart Square event since it started. So she was a wonderful body of knowledge just to get to know her and hear about the different quilts. And she didn't participate. Some of the women that came worked on their own projects, did some hand piecing. I brought little squares. I cut up 5-inch squares and did blue and white and handed those out as 4 patches. So I'd hand it to somebody and say, here's a 4 patch, some assembly required. And I really wanted to give them to kids more than anything else, but not a lot of kids. I mean, we had a few, but not as many as I was expecting came through. And so I ended up handing those squares a lot more to older women, women that said that they had maybe been into quilting or piecing or just showed some interest. It was really interesting. Some people, when you hand them something, they say, thank you, oh my gosh, I really appreciate that. And then some people were almost repelled, by the idea of, no, I don't want that, almost defiant. I don't want that, don't give me that, which I found really interesting. A few people were downright emotional, coming through the cabin, seeing us stitching. They were nearly in tears, and that was really surprising. And I think it's bringing back those memories of their grandmothers or great-grandmothers hand quilting around a frame like that. I think that imagery is something that people carry, and it just brings you back, and that's where that emotion was. And in general, I will say I feel a little emotional when I'm at Hart Square. It's such a magical place. 80 log cabins. The center village area has a lot of log cabins all packed together. And I'll be honest, my one regret is I didn't really get a good chance to look at it during festival. I mean, everybody was there and everybody was demonstrating, but I really wanted to be hand quilting. And so I just focused on my little cabin and just doing that. And I didn't really get to tour around. I didn't really get to see the cabins or the demonstrations. I'd say next year I'll probably try and show up even earlier than I did. And try and get around to at least, the blacksmith shop. I'm thinking Dad may demonstrate in the blacksmith shop next year. And I want to get around to, there's an Indian village, and there's a log cabin with a stockade fence. So it's kind of that style of log cabin. I've never been into that one, but I've seen that one several times. I need to get over there and check it out. It's just really fascinating. It is a really neat place. And there's just this, for me, it's just the things I love the most about North Carolina all in one place. I love the deciduous woods. That reminds me of the woods behind my house growing up. I love the cabins for some reason. That reminds me, although they're nothing like them, that reminds me of the cabins I stayed in at camp and Quaker Link Camp in North Carolina. I love the state. I really do. I grew up here. This feels like home to me. And Hart Square, something about it and those log cabins and the history, and you see all of these tools, and clearly that tool, that strap of leather, hooked to the side of the log cabin, was there for a reason. People use that on a daily basis. What did they use it for? I have no idea. But at one point, our lives were very, very different from the way they are now. And we had a whole host of tools to make our lives easier that we don't even know how to use now. We don't even know what they're for anymore. But I'm sure if we went back and we're living in a log cabin again, maybe like, man, I really need that piece of leather strapped to the side of the log cabin. There was this like random length of leather about that long on a metal ring, and it was hung on a little nail. And it might have been for sharpening tools, because I sharpen my leather working tools on something similar. It might have been something to clean your boots on. I don't really know, but it was something old and attached to the side of the log cabin, something interesting. And that's the thing. It just really forces you to realize how far we've come in such a short space of time, because that log cabin was built in 1840. So that is, 200, not even 200 years ago. That is very, very fast to go from almost no technology and no lighting, and only a wood fire, to all of the amazing things that we have now. And it certainly makes me feel very, very thankful for all that we have now. I'm sitting there at the quilt frame and feeling fairly chilly and fairly stiff. I'm in this kind of hard back chair. At a few times I started realizing the limits of how far I could stitch comfortably, and I'm kind of bending over because I want to finish this line of stitching, and the dim lighting was challenging to see in, and it was harder than I thought to stitch straight lines. And we were using a few modern helpful things like 1/4-inch masking tape just to make that a little bit easier. But yeah, it just really, I think, makes, more than anything else, it makes me feel very gracious for all the things that we take for granted: central heating, good lighting, being able to do all of that by machine too. But then, on the other hand, I feel like there's a few things there that we've lost. The ability to get together with other women and sit around a quilting frame and stitch and have that simple, gentle conversation. I think that's something we need to bring back in a major way. And I think that is probably why we're having, I try not to talk about politics, but just the level of nastiness that things have gotten, on the news. And I don't watch the news for simply that reason. It's gone too far. I think if we brought back that simple connection of people, face-to-face stitching or doing something creative with our hands, it's impossible to be, to have this level of discord in that situation. Do you know what I mean? So yeah, it was super cool. Super, super cool. Now, one other thing that I made for my costume that I am super happy with, and I could not have gone to Hart Square without, I made these pockets. So back in the day, you would not carry a purse to carry your things. You would carry everything in nice big pockets. And so I looked online and just kind of got a few ideas and then pulled this together. And so basically it is a long pouch about 12 inches long, and it has a slit down the front and then holds a surprising amount of things down into it. And there's another little scrap of fabric that I had. So I packed one with some snacks and my car keys and my cell phone, all my modern things. And then I packed the other one with my needle and thread and my fabric squares that I cut for everybody. And yeah, I just wrapped that around my waist and tied it off, and it was awesome. I felt like I had a pair of saddlebags on when I was walking around, but it holds a surprising amount of stuff, and it's so much less cumbersome than a purse. That I'm like, okay, if this worked, for this reenactment, how could I design this so it actually looks cool for the modern age? So I'm thinking about taking that idea and turning it into some sort of bag. That would be a lot of fun, and to not have to carry a purse would be great. Strap something on my thigh or around my waist, or I don't know, something like that. That would be a lot of fun. So yeah, as you can see, I had a marvelous time. it was such a great experience. And I can absolutely say I'm going to try and go back to Hart Square every time, every year from now on. There was a woman that drove in from Wisconsin with her kids that, she said flat out, this is my favorite week, day of the entire year. And I love that. I completely agree. It is such a delight and feels like such a gift to be able to go. And, I would happily pay to be there, but demonstrators get in and are able to attend for free. And then I like it because it made it just a little bit easier for me to buy tickets for my family. So that was definitely an advantage of demonstrating. I'm crossing my fingers, maybe James will want to dress up a little bit and go next year. He got really sick with a head cold. Dad got really sick with a head cold. I think there was just a bug going around, and they all kind of came down with it all at once. So that wasn't a lot of fun, but I'm hoping that James will come back with me next year and we'll dress up and maybe help out in the print shop or help out making out apple cider or something like that. I think it's really, really important to keep immersing him in things like this and showing him the way that things were. And being around horses and being around tinsmiths and gunsmiths and potters, the whole 9 yards of it. It was just such a delight. So if you know of other events like this, of other situations where they're needing demonstrators and I can dress up and come and hand quilt, I would love to be a part of that. So definitely let me know in the comments below or send me an email at leahday.com/contact. And I will see if I can work that in. I definitely plan to be back at Hart Square, and it's always the last Saturday in October. And if you are in any way interested in this, I think it's definitely worth a visit to come on out and see this awesome, awesome place. 80 log cabins, historically preserved, fully furnished, the quilts, the weaving looms, all of it. It's just amazing. It really, really is. So that is it for this week. I hope that you enjoyed hearing about Hart Square and this just amazing experience that I had. I am still recovering. If I look tired today, it's because I am tired today. As I said earlier, the thing about being an introvert is that I need to rebuild my energy by being alone. And that's what I plan on doing. I am going to go and drive up to Gastonia and take Dad some cold medicine. He's caught that cold, and take care of that, and then I'm going to do a little bit more editing and photography and getting the Miss Bunny pattern ready to go. Miss Bunny and Mally the Maker and the Queen of the Quilt, they're all shipping out on Thursday, so don't forget, come and pre-order your copy of the book and the pattern at leahday.com/Mally. I hope that you enjoyed this episode. Find many more podcast episodes at leahday.com/podcast. Until next time, let's go quilt.